Started by introducing our fabulous speaker today, Jessica LaBrie. She's an herbalist, an educator, and a wise woman. An old-fashioned job title that means she supports her community with the information, affirmation, and old-world skills to bring our modern lives back into balance. She's a lifelong dowser and the president of the New Hampshire Herbal Network, which is the AHG chapter. She's the owner of Blackbird's Daughter Botanicals, blackbirdsdaughter.com, and co-owner of Mama's Kiss Cannabis, which is mamaskisscannabis.com. Her artisan apothecary, gardens, and woodland trails located on 125 acres in scenic Barrington, New Hampshire, are a registered United Plant Savers Botanical Sanctuary and a place of healing, prayer, and joyful reconnection with the harmony and abundance of nature. And so Jessica will be taking questions. We'll just ask everybody to mute right now, but if you do have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking on the reactions at the bottom of the page or type a question in the chat, and I'll be watching the chat for you. And take it away, Jessica.
Awesome, thank you. So I'm so grateful to be here. Super happy to be presenting here. And I learned to dowse when I was very little, and my dad was the one who taught me how. So I have a little presentation. I'm going to share my screen with you just so you don't have to kind of stare at me talking by myself all this whole time. So let me just get our screen share up and running. And hit play here, and all right, so hopefully you can see me, you can see the screen, and we'll go from there. So,
yes, we're good.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to give you a teeny tiny bit of background about me, and then we'll explode into all of the ways that I love working with dowsing, and hopefully you all can be able to do so as well. And if you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact me later on, and my contact's in the chat. So I'm Jessica LaBrie. I practice sacred Gaian herbalism. I've been an herbalist for 11 years now, and I am a wise woman, like Mary had shared. I'm a green witch, educator, and a general lover of the green world. So the founder of Blackbird's Daughter Botanicals and Mama's Kiss Cannabis. And I was the president of the New Hampshire Herbal Network, but we just passed that on to new president. And I learned, as I said, from my father, David. And so just really quickly, we talked about what a wise woman is. For me, what it means to be a green witch is that my reverence for the planet is the thing that guides me in all things. And so while I don't want to speak for any other green witches out there, generally speaking, I think the title is for someone who practices a form of witchcraft and really works with the plants, the mushrooms, the natural world, and especially the herbs. Often we're herbalists. And so we do this with a deep sense of reverence. And so for me, it's really important to be able to use dowsing, to be able to teach people how to dowse, to turn to this form of very subtle energetic diagnostics in all of these different elements of my life. So we'll go through kind of how that works out in my world. But a little bit about sacred Gaian herbalism, so you understand even more why it's important to be able to dowse. And this is not a term that I coined, although when I started using it, I didn't know that it actually was a thing. So I'm sure other people have different definitions. But for me, for us in our practice, sacred Gaian herbalism is herbalism built around reciprocal, reverent connection with the earth and respect for the beings with whom we share the planet and make medicine. Our practices are guided by principles of social justice and environmental stewardship. To us, herbs aren't resources. They are allies, teachers, friends. And because we know that every individual's needs are different, we take the time to build relationship with the herbs and the people that we work with, so we can offer the right combination of lovingly crafted remedies, advanced knowledge, practical guidance, and spiritual connection to nature that each person needs. Simply put, sacred Gaian herbalism is herbalism for body, mind, and spirit. So you can see how being able to dowse is going to fit right in all of those bold points here. We're really able to use dowsing throughout the practice of sacred Gaian herbalism. So why do we do it? Why do we dowse? Well, for me, in my mind, this is an empowering and impactful energetic diagnostic tool. We use dowsing to take care of ourselves better, our communities, our environment, and we'll get into how practically we do that. We use dowsing so that we can know ourselves more outside of the normal senses that we have, touch, taste, proprioception, all of those things, to be able to tune in and have access to a deeper, true source of information that maybe we wouldn't be able to normally pick up on, or maybe we're using those senses to dowse. And again, we'll get into that in the future too. This is a really empowering extra tool for us. So we can know ourselves better, our bodies, what we need. We can know the world around us more, so we can really make sure that we're walking in right relationship with the animals and the plants and the mycelial world, and really, walking lightly and doing the greatest amount of good and the least amount of harm, which is a thing I always try and check in with myself about. We can access more knowledge, and we can walk with a lighter footprint and in greater harmony. Why else do we dowse? It's non-static. You can pick up your pendulum or your L rods, and you can check in multiple times a day, different times during the year, different times during the season if you're feeling differently. Because if you go to a doctor or a nutritionist and you get a great plan of what you're going to do, that doesn't take into account your stress level or the seasonal shifts, or maybe you fall down and you injure yourself and you're like, shoot, which of these supplements should I be taking to help heal? So dowsing is not static. You can just kind of go into it anytime and access up to the minute information. So that's super cool. It's available when you need it. It is affordable, i.e. it's free, which is really cool, not just because I'm a frugal Yankee New Englander, but also because I really think that healthcare as we practice it in America is a capitalist system that does not actually help people. And it's really not accessible for folks. So if we can give people affordable, free tools and information that they can then share, that's super important. It's ecological. We don't have to drive anywhere to do this, right? We can just pick up our L rods or tune into our muscle testing, and we've got it down. It helps us be better stewards of the planet. So it's accessible. You can do it anywhere. It saves time. You don't have to waste a bunch of time waiting to see if this formula works for you, or if this thing has a negative reaction. You got it right then. And it saves resources, because if I can, if I'm lovingly crafting these remedies in partnership with the plants, that means I'm not going out and I'm not planting a huge field of something. For the most part, I'm planting small amounts, and I'm checking them with the pollinators, and I'm gathering a very small quantity of plant material or mushroom material, and I'm doing that with intention. And so if I've got half a gallon of something put up, which is a lot of a tincture, but if that's what I've got put up in my apothecary, and I can fine tune dowsing formulas for people, it means I'm not wasting that, giving them something that they don't actually need or that isn't the best thing for them. So I don't have to gather as much. So again, we're back to it being a really ecological thing. Also saves me money because, you know, bottles and alcohol and stuff like that, it ain't cheap. So it's, you know, it saves us a lot of resources. It saves us a lot of storage space when you think about that. It's a really smart tool. And if you're somebody who does field work, or maybe you're going to a pipeline protest, or maybe you're a street medic, or you are going camping with your family, or you know, whatever it is, like we've only got so much space, and so it's really behooves us to have a tool that is really small, that can fit into our pouch or our pockets, or we're just using our body, and we know exactly what we need. We don't have to have as much on us or with us. So again, this is kind of one of those guiding principles. May I do the greatest amount of good with the least amount of harm. And I try and follow that as much as possible. And that's a picture of some snowdrops here coming up through the leaves. Yeah, so these are the 3 questions that my father taught me. And he learned dowsing from the American Dowsers Association. He went to a conference when I was little, and he really, really, really little. And he brought that back. And I still remember the citrine pendulum he brought back, and knowledge. And I remember being like maybe 4 or so, maybe a little bit older. And he would take me out into the woods and the fields at my grandparents' old farm, and told me to feel for energy and ley lines and feel the tingle in my palms. So I was really young when I started feeling the energetics, and I would say I connected to the energetic realm from infancy, really. But as he started to teach me how to use these tools, pendulums and L rods, and we made L rods together. This is a pair that we made together. You can see it's got the little sheath on here to hold, and we'll go into a little bit of how to use that. But when he taught me how to do this, he always said to ask these 3 questions: can I dowse? May I dowse? And should I dowse? And if the answer to any of those was a no, then it wasn't appropriate for us to do this. So there's a real reason why, as we access information, we try and do it with humility. We try and do it with reverence. We try and do it with an awareness of our mortal, human, fallible natures. You know, sometimes, can I dowse? I really want to, but I'm exhausted. And so the answer is no. And I know from experience that if I try and push through it, I'm going to get some like funky answers. It's not going to be as accurate. So can I dowse might just be as simple as you physiologically are not in a place, or emotionally or mentally are not in a place to do it. May I dowse? You don't have permission. There are plenty of times with clients where I will be dowsing to come up with a sacred perfume blend, or the right tincture blend, or you know, I'm doing an intake evaluation, and I'm like, we're trying to come up with things for what's the best formula for them. And I get to this may I dowse part, and I don't have permission to. And so then I have to back up, and really you do need to be humble. You need to be aware that you shouldn't, in my mind, at least as a practitioner, I want to dismantle this capitalist, oppressive colonizer idea of who has access to information and power, and get it back into the hands of the people all the time. So may I dowse? If I don't have permission to, I'll pause with my client and say, you know, like I'm getting at, I don't have permission to. So I'm wondering, maybe do you have more information on that? Do you know why that might be? Like, what is it? Why don't you tell me more? You know, so it gives us a chance to really practice with integrity. Should I dowse? Maybe it's just not the right thing to do. Maybe it's for whatever reason, I can do it. I have permission to do it, but I shouldn't do it. You know, so just because we can do something doesn't mean it's the best choice to. Maybe I shouldn't have that information about that person. Maybe I should be doing some other work first. Maybe I should be accessing information in a different way, or it's not mine to know. Whatever the reasons are, I don't have to know the reasons. I just have to trust that these are like the three legs of the stool that allow things to be in balance. So if there's anything that you can take away from this, besides the idea that this belongs to all of us, and personally, I say herbalism is your birthright, claim it. These three things are the things that will help you act with the greatest integrity, I think. And then is the trickster present? That's a really great question, because sometimes things are like, you're not getting the right answer. And at least in our home, in the training that he had, that he passed on to me, and he's still with us and fabulous. I don't want you to think that he is passed on, but when I was a little girl, decades ago, what he taught me was to ask, is the trickster present? And then you can say, if the answer is yes, like, I ask that I respectfully am asking for you to leave so I can have clear answers here. Is that something that is the trickster present? No. Okay, good. So there's all different ways for us to find this information, and questions to ask. So
I do have a quick question for you.
yeah, please.
Let's see. This is Barbara wants to know the difference between may I and should I.
Oh, great question. So may I is, do we have permission? And that opens up the interesting question of, well, who do we get permission from? Should I is it appropriate for me to do this? Is it the best option, the best thing to do in this moment? So, and I don't know who gives us permission. I think that we are all, and again, this is just me, I think we are all part of the all of us energetic living beings who have lived in the past, will live in the future, are currently alive, are all one. And when we are doing things of a spiritual nature, and I do think that dowsing is spiritual and practical, we're trying to safeguard our choices so we don't overstep. And so saying, may I do this, is a way of checking in, getting your ego out of the way, and pulling in like the mantle of, am I doing the greatest amount of good in the least amount of harm right now? And so that's where that comes in. And should I think of that as like more of a practical kind of thing, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? And I can't quite see the chat now.
Going back to Barbara, I'll ask. And I get what you're saying. She said thanks. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. I'm glad. Yeah. Any other questions now, or should we skip to the next slide?
Nothing else so far. I'll jump in if I see something.
Thank you. All right. So how do we dowse? There are a lot of different ways to dowse. I am going to give you information about the three that I use the most often. So let me bring my little tray over here. So I only have two things on this tray. I've got my pendulum and I have my L rods, and I'm also wearing a pendulum. And I make, one of the things I do is I make sacred perfumes and amulets for people. I find that they're fabulous, not only because it's nice to like have the important aromatherapy smell or whatever it is, whatever totems or items you're putting in there at hand, but also because they make fabulous pendants and pendulums for dowsing, and we like to be practical around here. So if something can be both beautiful and functional, awesome. So for the most part, this is the pendulum. This is a pendulum that I will use. But I've taught people how to make buttons on a string pendulums, and really, I like to be a little bit wild and dismantling the systems that oppress us, and be really out there about the fact that like our bodies are holy and sacred, and um, we have access to wisdom beyond our bodies. So a rock on a string, a um, a pebble attached to a shoelace. I have made pendulums out of like an unopened OB tampon attached to a piece of dental floss just to prove that yes, you can do it. And this is holy and sacred and phenomenal.
I have
So,
another quick question for you.
yeah.
I guess a couple people are having trouble hearing you and wondering if you can move a little closer to the
Oh,
mic.
sure, sure. Let's see if I can pull this over here. I can also yell a little bit. How's that, folks?
I can hear you good.
Okay, cool. If you can't hear me, let Mary know. Yeah. So, so let's start out with our L rods. Some people, and I'm not going to go into all the details because we've only got an hour here, but some people will use L rods that are just like a coat hanger that you cut, and you can put some old like thread spools, empty thread spools on here if you want something to hold on to, but you don't have to. Some people like just having the plain metal, you know, and that's fine. I really love these ones that we made. I love the fact that my dad and I made them together, and I love the fact that they work. They're a good length for me. And you'll have to pick what length you like them to be, and you know how you want them. But L rods for me, the way I do it is I hold them. They can be slightly facing downward a little bit, and because if they're upright, they're going to move a lot. If they're down, it's a little better. And I'm going to push us back just a bit so we're not on top of the computer, but I'll enunciate clearly.
One more question.
Yeah.
When you're done just showing those, Barbara would like to know how you made them.
Oh, yeah. So, well, shameless self-promotion. If you're interested in us making a pair for you, you can email me. But these ones, it's very simple for you to make them yourself. That you do need some tools for this, but it is copper. It's a thick gauge of copper. I guess you'd call it wire, but it's not really super flexible. And then there's a little bit of tube around it here. And I think maybe it's copper and brass. I'll have to double check. Maybe this is the copper and this is the brass. My dad is very clear on which materials we should be using for this, you know, when we do it. But what you do is you cut them, and then you'll need some sandpaper to sand on the edge so it's not super sharp for you. So you'll cut your length of metal and bend it once, or your two lengths of metal. You bend them, and using whatever tools you have for that, a vice grip or whatever you need, you slide your piece of tubing on that you've also sanded down and polished, and then you hold that in place and you twist up the end so it doesn't fall off. But you can, if you look up how to make them, I don't think I have a book. Oh, you know what? I do have a book that's a really fun. I'm not affiliated with this author or publishing house or anything, but this is a really basic one, The Diviner's Handbook by Tom Graves. And in here, I think he has some images of how to make them out of a coat hanger. And let me see if I can pull that up for you. I don't know what page it's on, but you know, if you don't want to look it up online, you can get a book to do it. So that's the L rods. And we'll talk about pendulums in a minute. So with our L rods here, I hold them slight downward angle, and I say, can I dowse? May I dowse? And should I dowse? And so let's see here. I am going, does anybody have a question that you would like me to dowse and answer to? That would be a fun thing. You can pop it into the chat if you do.
I would love to know how you are walking through the woods and determine which particular herb wants to be in your formula.
Okay. All right. So let's use an example for that. And I'm going to make something up here right now. I'm going to think about um, a tea. Like I'm going to make a tea for my husband when he comes home from work tonight. And I want to know what herbs would be the best blend to go in there. And I know that's not exactly your question. I'm just trying to think of how I can walk it into this demo here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to position myself a little bit sideways here so that you can see what the rods are doing a little bit better. So I'm thinking about, I want to make a tea blend that's really healing for Steve and whatever.
Need to talk up a little bit.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm thinking I want to make a tea blend that's really healing for Steve. And what's the, will I be able to use my dowsing right now to come up with that formula, or will I be able to start thinking about the right herbs and picking the herbs? And so I'm going to say, holding it at neutral, can I dowse? Yes, I can. It's crossing. That's my yes. And may I dowse? I've got another yes, and then I'm going to tilt it down, bring it back to neutral. And should I dowse? And that's a yes. So I have my 3 questions are answered here. So then I can go through and think about, and this is where we're popping a little bit ahead onto like what we do in the kitchen and in the apothecary. But for me as an herbalist, I'm going to think about, sometimes there will be plants that pop into my head right away. And so I can ask that question, but I want to save time. So I'm going to break things down into categories. And you can do this when you're cooking too. So for me, I'm going to go, okay, if I'd like to make a blend for Steve, and I would like it to have 5 or less herbs in it. Can I make the best healing blend? Is that something that I can do tonight for him? Yes. Okay. So will I put in nervines? Nervines are a class of herbs that help the nervous system. Should there be 1 or more nervines in that formula? Yes. Great. Would milky oat be one? Would black, let's see, what would be a good nervine? How about California poppy? Would that be a good one? Would it be good to have some skullcap in there? Yes. Okay, so I know skullcap is one. How about passion flower? No. Are there any other nervines that should go into that formula? No. Okay, so now I know I'm done with my list of nervines, and I'm going to write down, yep, I've got my skullcap is going in. And then I'll go through and I'll say, would it be helpful to have an anti-inflammatory in that formula? How about a muscle relaxant? Yes, okay. Would kava be a good one to put it into there? No. Okay. Let's see. Would it be helpful to have, well, we've already got our skull cap. What's another muscle relaxant that I might want to put in there? How about, like, would lavender be helpful? No. Okay. Do I have the herb in my kitchen? Do I have it in the apothecary down below? Yes. Is it on the top shelf? Or is it, oh, we're doing dried herbs. That's right. Is it in the first filing cabinet of dried herbs? No. Is it in the second cabinet of dried herbs? No. Is it in the third cabinet? Yes. Okay. And I have my herbs alphabetically stored. So those are some ways that you can go through and really quickly save yourself time. So you break things down into categories or placement. When I'm working with my essential oils, so this is a very small box that Steve made for me that I love, but it's got a small selection of my oils in here. So if I were making a blend for somebody, I might go through and say, is it in the top row? Is it after I go through and figure out how many oils should go in there? To go back to your question of in the woods, like figuring out what plants to gather, we can ask, is it appropriate for me to gather? Here's my purpose. Here's the thing that I'm wanting to do. And I like saying it out loud. but you don't have to. You could formulate your thought in your head. I like doing it out loud. I feel like it makes it a little bit more concrete and actionable and helps me remember what I'm doing. But hey, Jack the cat, come on up if you want. So my cat might make a guest appearance here. So you could go through and you could say, is it in, I'm looking for an herb to help so-and-so, or I'm wanting to gather and get, prepare my stocks for wintertime, thinking of whatever is going to be the greatest need in my community. Are there herbs here that I can gather? Are they to the left down the path, or are they down the right path? Are they ahead 500 feet? Are they, or I could think of my normal gathering places and go, is it time for me to tend to grandmother elder over here? Should I drive to, does she need me to clean up the Japanese knotweed at the base? That's going to save me gas if I can ask those questions ahead of time. So those are some of the things that we might use an L rod or the L rods for. Pendulum. And it's honestly, it's down to personal preference. Some other things I should say about the L rods, like some people's crossing is a yes, or going apart is a yes. Sometimes you have a neutral, and you can do a similar thing with L rods as you can with the pendulum in terms of directing things as well. So for me, I'm going to hold my pendulum. I like to wrap it around my finger, and that can control the length of it. And your pendulum's weight is going to be largely dependent on how long your cord is. If it's a shorter cord, you can get away with a lighter weight. If it's a longer one, to just get enough of that that tension, you can add a heavier, heftier thing like a plumb bob. If you can find an old-fashioned plumb bob, those are awesome. But I like my necklaces and my acorns here. And this is an acorn from a white oak that grows here that we tend. So I'm going to set it to just a cross, waving back and forth. And I like holding my hand above it, or below it rather. And that's going to be my neutral here. And then I say, show me yes. And my yes is a counterclockwise spiral. Show me no. And my no is a 12 to 6 straight line. And then I say, show me uncertain, or unable to figure out the information. And I get, it generally goes very similar to my neutral. And so I direct it and I say, could our uncertain, I'm giving it a little flick of my wrist. So it's back to that neutral, like 1 to 7 o'clock on a clock face swing. And I say, I'd like my uncertain or needs more information to be 3 and 9. Okay, and I'm directing that with my mind. I'm directing that. And the way I think dowsing works is you get very finite muscle motor shifts, and that translates through the tools that you're using. And that doesn't mean you're manipulating it, although you can. That's why we ask the questions and we really try and clear our mind and not push things. But at times we do want to direct it. At times we do have, it is appropriate to direct it so you can get your clearest answer. Now you can also direct things so that like I would like the amount of swing or the velocity to show a difference. So if it's a strong yes, show me a strong yes. All right, and I've got a pretty wide spin. It's wider than the palm of my hand. And please show me a yes, but it's not as strong of a yes, and that's smaller. So you can figure out what you want and set your parameters so you can see things more clearly dowsing. Now, body testing, I'm just gonna check our time here. Okay, cool. So body testing for us could be muscle testing, like kinesiology, where, like maybe you try and have some pressure against a hand to see like how strong something is, or holding a supplement bottle towards you. Another thing you could do is, let's see, I have my my dandelion leaf tincture here. And so I'm gonna put my feet on the floor and hold it and lean. So is this a helpful thing for me to have right now? And I just let my body sway. If you're standing upright, you'll kind of loosen your knees and let yourself sway. And is dandelion helpful for me now? Surprisingly, I'm leaning away from dandelion. That surprises me because I love this plant and I'm always nibbling in the garden. Maybe the reason I don't need this in tincture form now is because I've been eating enough of it in the garden. But let's see with I've got a screen time eye support in here. And just so you all know, this is blueberries, bilberries, marigolds, and ginkgo. So if you have any of those growing, those are all really good for your eyes. So would this be a useful one for me to take? And I get a very strong yes. I'm like practically, face planting myself into this bottle here. So I'm gonna go, okay, I'll take that. Now, if I'm happy just taking a little squirt of this, that's great. But let's go back to see what's optimal for us here. So I go back and say I want to dowse and figure out the amount. And so we'll say, can I dowse? May I dowse? No, I don't have a permission to dowse for may I dowse for this. So I'm not going to do that now because I don't have permission, but you can see that's what I would do. So in this case, just gonna take a little bit of that and call it. So some people get a sense of tingling, like when I'm going over, if I'm dowsing in the woods and I want to feel for ley lines or underground water, I set that intention and I can feel a tingle in my palm. Some people, when they're dowsing, their yeses or nos would be like, they might sneeze or they might feel a little queasy in their stomach for a second or get a like muscle tick. So you'll figure that out on your own. So let's go it through. I'm going to kind of go through fairly quickly because I want to make sure we have enough time for questions. But here's some different scenarios where we might use this. Farming and gardening. You could use, and I do use dowsing to figure out, is this soil the right place for me to plant this? Are there amendments that I might need to add to this soil? If so, what kinds? Is it this? Is it this? That kind of a situation. Land, like the geography of something, the topography of something. I am constantly shaping and tending this land that we are lucky enough to steward and live on. And for me, oftentimes I will know what project this land wants me to do, or the devas of the land, or however you think of it, because my sight goes, I will be looking at a place and my sight will go kind of sepia toned, and then one area will be particularly bright, and I will kind of get in my mind almost a vision of what it should look like. And I think of that, well, that's kind of like my body is telling me, I'm picking up information. Whether that is dowsing or not, I don't really know that it's dowsing, but then I have to figure out, how do I do that? Like, okay, this is the message that I'm being told to do. I've got these awesome hands and opposable thumbs and feet, and I can move and lift things that the trees can't do on their own. The stones can't do it on their own. So like, then I can dowse and ask, like, what is the best time for me to move this? Would it make sense to do this in this season? How would this affect the energy flow of the water underneath the land? All of these things. And that brings up water. I was just out in my driveway. We have a pond really close to our house. And then we have the water will, based on the water pressure of the pond and the snow and the rain, it will squeeze out underground. Little springs will come up here and there. And so I was just walking with my L rods across the driveway and holding them in front of me. And as I go over water, they cross and then they uncross. So I take a few more steps and then they cross and uncross. So I can tell where is the water flowing. Then you could also go for depth. You could go for the how quickly the water is flowing. You can ask your yes or no questions. Is this is this between 5 and 10 feet under the soil? If it's a yes, is it 6 feet? Is it 7 feet? Does it start 7 feet down? Yes. Okay. So you can really get very specific pieces of information about the water near you as well. We have a lot of runoff here from the rain coming off of the old roof. So last summer, when we had some big thunderstorms coming, instead of just letting it wash out our driveway, I went out there and I dowsed to see where I should put some divots to divert the water. And it worked. Hooray! So you can do a lot with water. Planting. Is this the right place for this plant? Is this the right species for this plant? Would this be the best optimal thing for the pollinators? How about companion planting? Would it be helpful for these two plants to grow together or separate? Growing and tending, when would be the best time for me to gather? And the best meaning the greatest good and the least amount of harm. There are other critters here who are eating these plants, who are gathering their pollen, who are relying on them for shelter or food. If the birds are nesting in the bush over here, I don't want to be gathering the plants under here and disturbing them. So all of these things, this very complicated web of which I know a very fraction of what's going on, can be more healthfully navigated by dowsing and finding out, what would be the optimal time? Would it be today? Would it be tomorrow? How about next week? How about, do we want to be gathering the top third of the plants? How about the top half of the plants? Do we just want to gather blossoms? Do we want to gather a full third of this? Do we want to gather a quarter of this? What's the best? So all of these are different things. You're growing, you're tending, you're gathering, you're drying, you're bringing them back and storing them. All of these are things that come into play. Let me see, why is my screen not, let me go back there. Okay, cool. In the wild. So while we're learning from the plants, I love learning from the plants in nature. And here's a picture of me with my wild crafting tool about slung around my neck because I'm slogging through. You can't tell, but those jeans are totally soaked from some serious marsh mud. So while learning from the plants, is there a message for me? Would this be helpful? How can I serve you? Are you okay? Do you need my support? Would it be helpful if I trimmed this branch? Are you is anybody encroaching on your territory? Is it, and then for rematriating species, would you like to, I know that in the past, before, when the Abenaki people were the only peoples two-legged on this land, these forests surrounding us, and I am coming to you from New Hampshire, which is part of occupied Ndakina. Ndakina is the traditional name for what we now think of as New England and parts of the lower parts of Canada. But so when the Abenaki people who still live here, when their ancestors were the only ones stewarding this, there was so much biodiversity, and the forests were being tended in ways that we would now maybe term permaculture or silviculture. So there's a lot of plants. When the Europeans arrived here, they were like, wow, it's amazing. There's these natural pathways through the woods with berries and fruits on either side. God must want us to be here. They were wrong about that, but they were correct that there was a lot of amazing abundance in the woods, and that's because people were tending it. Then over the years, the land, at least in New Hampshire especially, was really cut. The forests were cut down, so there was a lot of farming in place. And then when the forests grew back, they grew back with a lot less diversity. So now we are rematriating these plants and we're bringing them back. So as I travel up to Vermont or down to Massachusetts or wherever I'm going, and I have other herbalist friends, we're trading species. Do you want some of the black cohosh? May I have some of your sweetgrass? I'd really love Trillium. I've been wanting to make this medicine trail, the mushroom and wild medicine trail, for years since I moved here, but I didn't know what plants belonged there. I had some visions of okay, I'm imagining from the get-go bloodroot over here, but I'm not sure about the others. But I know I love Trillium. So I'm up in Vermont recently, and I go out into the old medicine gathering place that I used to go, and I checked in and I asked, would it be appropriate for me to bring some of you back? I'd really love to. Would this be a good space for you? Where would you be happiest? And then when I do bring them back, where here would you be happiest? Would you like to grow here? How about over here? So we're checking in constantly. When we're wildcrafting, which means we're gathering with reverence, we're never taking, we are not harvesting because we didn't plant those species. And we're always asking permission, we're courting the plants, we're practicing enthusiastic consent. It's not just for sex, folks, it's for plants too. So we're constantly going like, I would so love to work with you. I would be honored if you would let me pick some of you. And if you're okay with that, Yarrow or Comfrey or whoever, I will make medicine with you. And if you have any suggestions, I will listen and do what you will. And I would just be so grateful if I could tend to my community by gathering from you. And then, do I have permission? And sometimes it's a very clear no, but take my sibling over here. Or sometimes it's yes, but I'm not going to give you as much as if you go and tap that maple tree over there. So it's constantly like listening and tuning in. That's not necessarily dowsing. It's a thing that I do a lot, plant communication, but you can dowse and use your L rods or your pendulum or your body to figure out like, is this appropriate? How much of this? What can I do? Is there anything that you need from me before I leave to leave you in better condition or in good condition? So we're sustainable, because it's all about humbling ourselves and being in right relationship with the plants. In the Apothecary, and you can see these beautiful asters here on my little old scale, we use dowsing for formulating, figuring out what's the best combination. And how do we do it? Preparing remedies. We're recreating all the time. We're investigating and experimenting. So how long would be the best amount of time for this to steep? What alcohol concentration of alcohol to water should my menstruum be to extract the most benefit out of these plants? I can look in my herbal library. There's dozens and dozens of books. I could look online, but I like knowing in the moment, because I truly believe that these plants are individuals. And terroir, the sense of place, you might have heard that word in wine talking. And so like the terroir is like the sense of place. So when you get like, oh, it's got a silty kind of note to it in this wine, people are talking about the flavor of the soil coming through the grapes and being able to pick up on it. Well, we have this sense of place in the plants. These asters had a very different water content, a different medicinal profile than asters grown in another field. So I don't think that it makes sense to follow the same remedy recipe around the world or even from year to year. I think it makes sense to really check in and say, what's the best thing that will be the most helpful? So we use dowsing, preparing remedies, blending, storing. Is this dry enough? What, like I'm using my organoleptics, my senses, my smell, touch, taste, all that stuff. How's it sound when I crumble it? But I'm also constantly referring back to my dowsing to figure out, how am I doing the best? Because I want to store things really well. Substitutions and changes in formulas. Shoot, I don't have as much comfrey as I had the last time I made this recipe. Should I do, do I need to add anything else in? How about this? How about that? I use my pendulum or my L rods to do that. What is needed? Always. What will be of the greatest service and benefit? In the kitchen, and here I am with an apprentice, and we're learning to make sauerkraut here. So we use dowsing when we're blending things, when we're storing things, when we're creating recipes. How nice not to have a ton of flops. If you could just right away check in and be like, does this seem like I'm on the right track? Will this be a flavor profile that my kids will eat? Like what, all of these questions you can ask. I'm wanting to make this thing and bring it for this party. Would this be the best thing for me? How about this? Like you can like brainstorm, come up with things. The timing. Do I need to cook this for an extra 5 minutes? Whatever. You can use your senses. I don't always dowse, but it's helpful to have that as your kind of like backup. Food pairings. That brings us to clients. I love dowsing to help people figure out food sensitivities, formulating protocols, combinations, frequency, dosage. And here I am in the herbal path in Dover, teaching a class on how to dowse, so you can figure out if there's an entire 2 shelves of magnesium, which one's going to be the best for you. And so seasonal, like you may need something, I need more vitamin D in winter than I need in the summertime. How much, which brand? I'd rather save myself time and money and get it right, as close to right as I can. Dowsing will help with that. If you're under a lot of stress, your body is reacting very differently. Your cortisol's high, your inflammation is up. You're going to need some different things. Providing herbal first aid. I've done some amazing work with people. I'm thinking of somebody who had a really intense burn and an explosion in his van that he was lying in. And so he had 2nd and some 3rd degree burns over his head and hands and arms. And he's a musician, and he needs to be able to bend his fingers and have nerve function. And I had never dealt with something that intense. So I definitely was dowsing as we were coming up with, like, what do we need to do to coat him? So I'm relying on my experience, my education, my training, but I'm also relying on my intuition. And sometimes it's easy to get that, a plant will pop into your head. But sometimes it's good to, check in. All right, so we've got a little bit of time left. So choosing the supplements, educating people. And that brings us to the next thing. Why is it important to educate people with dowsing and in terms of how to dowse? Because these little folks are the next generation. We've done the best we can. Our ancestors have done the best they can. We're leaving these people in a pretty big pickle of a planet. And so we need them to have as much confidence in accessing their intuition and connecting with nature as possible. We need to return the agency and power back to the client, back to the student. I am forever telling my students, if I give you an assignment to do this thing, and you feel very called to do something else, which is more important? It's not pleasing your teacher. It's doing what you're called to do. So follow your instinct. We really want people to have agency and autonomy. We want to break down the capitalist, colonizer, classist structure of healthcare. And I should have put on racist as well, and sexist. It's all of these systems that are systems of oppression that are built into our culture. And when we know better, we can do better. And I can't fix everything, but I can help teach people and give people tools. And dowsing is an amazing tool so that they can go on and take charge of their own health, empower their families, empower their communities, train the next generations. Ultimately, dowsing, to me, you can have all sorts of fancy tools. You can have a gazillion pendulums if you want to. But to me, it's about a return to simplicity and humility. We don't need to know it all. We cannot know it all, but we can access the knowledge. So if you have questions, I know we have got a couple more minutes for questions here, but you are welcome to reach out to me at office@blackbirdsdaughter.com. I don't check my email all the time, but I will check it pretty regularly. You can see if we have workshops. Oh, there's an extra W there on that. Ignore that extra W. We're at blackbirdsdaughter.com. We've got workshops and classes and work parties that are free times that people can come and hang out and, have some fun co-creating this space and dowsing together. What's the next step to make this place? And you can set up a time to come and visit if you ever want to. So that's us. And I would love to, in the last little bit of time, answer any questions that people have.
Jessica, this is Mary. Do you want to also be in the lounge after this to connect with people?
Yeah, I will be happy to be in the lounge for a little bit. Yeah.
So I have posted that in the chat as well.
Okay, sweet.
So people can meet you there. They do need to just click on that link and register and then join you there. and you'll be in a private room there to talk with people who've been here.
Great, nice.
This has been awesome. Thank you.
Cool. All right. So if you haven't been in the chat, check this space and you'll get that. Perfect. And
There's also a speaker evaluation link in the chat, so please do click on that. And if you want to save those, you can click on the 3 dots next to the word file, and you can save the chat on your computer. So I meant to tell you earlier, John had a quick, he asked about valerian root when you were making that
Oh, yeah.
tincture for your husband.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Well, let's see if
You said it was
valerian would be a
the
good
third filing cabinet. I thought, well, that's a V. So.
Yeah, let's see if that's one that would be helpful in that formula. So for a T, we're going back. Can I and may I? Should I? Oh yeah, great. And then, okay, I'm so glad you said that, because now I'm going to say, would the sleep tea that I already have made up be helpful? Oh, yep, that's a yes. That just saved us time. Thank you so much, John. Isn't it cool how you can you follow these little trails and then you put things together and then you can double check. It's like, no, I'm just very, very grateful to have this skill and to be able to have a community of people and constantly be growing a community so we can reference and grow together. Yeah.
Okay, are there any other questions for Jessica?
I know, Jessica, I think I heard you said that your pendulum is a, what, it looked like an acorn.
Yeah. So this is a white oak acorn, and we drilled down into, actually, did I drill into this one? I think I did a little bit, but pop the top off, make sure it's doesn't have any holes, because you don't want any insects in there. And then you drill or you can use a strong needle to go through the center of the cap, and then thread your cord through, tie a knot on it. And I've added a little bead here and then another knot. But you can, I then put a little glue underneath and press it in place.
So do you, I guess, does it make I guess some people wonder about they have pendulums that are made out of amethyst, rose quartz, different crystals. Does it make any difference between one pendulum to the next?
I think that there's some people who would argue that yes, it does. I don't know. To be perfectly honest with you, I try, for all the complexity that I might throw into a formula here or there, I try and be really simple and really say use the tools that you have and use what you're called to use, or what you feel is at hand. And acorns grow around a lot of places. Little pebbles are found around a lot of places. I'm happy to sell you a pendulum. I know you're not asking that, but in general, I'm happy to sell the pendulums that I make. I'm even happier to support people in making their own tools. You know what I mean? So if you've got an amethyst one and you love your amethyst, go for it. If not, that's fine. And maybe some people are yeah, amethyst will have this energy, rose quartz will have this energy. If we're going down that rabbit hole, were child slaves used in the mining of that amethyst and rose quartz? They usually, unfortunately, are. That the gemstone trade is not one that is a great trade for the many people who are involved. So you have to balance all of the different equations, the energy of the stones, how they came, who they were sourced from, all of that jazz. And so, ultimately though, I'm trying to not have it be about the things that I use, and more about can I open myself, get my ego out of the way, get what I think I know out of the way, and get what I need to know to come through.
Okay, thank
you. Yeah. Well, thanks everybody. I'm really grateful that you showed up for this, and be in touch if you have more questions.
Thank you, Jessica. This has been amazing.